Welcome back. After 750 days, the national state of disaster is officially over, and this decision has been welcomed largely. But that doesn't mean it's the end of COVID-19, according to the Health Minister. Government is urging the public to remain vigilant. Co-Chairperson of the Ministerial Advisory Committee, Professor Koleka Mlisana, joins us now live. Prof, thanks for your time. Appreciate it. So no absolute freedom just yet, right? Because the current regulations are still in place for 30 days for what government is calling a transition period. How necessary is that?
Okay, good evening, Shahan, and thanks for having me. Yes, no, definitely we're not over yet. And I really don't think, I think you mentioned this earlier on, we just need to understand that COVID has not gone away and it's not going to go away. And so we need to just make sure that we remain vigilant. So the issue with the 30 days, if you're looking at what the president said on, I think it was Monday, last night, is that, whilst then, which we all welcome, the cease of the state of disaster, it becomes important to then have something in between whilst the Department of Health and the other regulations are being finalized. So it's a matter of seeing, yes, the state of disaster is gone, but then, come 30 days, there should have been something in place, because the critical issue is, with the restrictions now no longer governed by the state of disaster, when there's a need, should there be a need, how do we then get those, to kick back? So it becomes important to create systems that are going to be agile enough to quickly, bring in what needs to be brought. But at the same time, for me, I think what's going to be important in those regulations is that there's got to be very clear triggers that are spelled out clearly, what will result in having to do X, Y, Z, and who has got to initiate that. So I'm assuming that's what the government is making sure that it's put into place.
So we have the National Health Act that's basically now going to manage this pandemic, according to the government. But today we heard from the Cooperative Governance Minister, Mlisana Zuma, answering questions from the media about the possibility of the national state of disaster coming back to deal with a fifth wave if absolutely necessary. Her answer was yes.
Sure.
So what's the point of removing it and going to the National Health Act to manage the virus and saying then that we might have to go back to it?
I guess the challenge, Shahan, is that there's always going to be a big challenge as to what's the best solution. Can we find just one solution? Because there has been this massive concern that it looks like what government is doing now, they're just shifting the state of disaster into the Health Act, and that really could not, that's not welcome. And therefore there's a need to have something where that gives enough and relative authority to the Minister of Health, whilst at the same time not giving full allowance to the department. So the state of disaster will still be something to revert back to. But right now, we're no longer in disaster. But then when there's disaster that comes in, that's when then it can be reenacted. But I think for me, it's important and it's a critical step to say there's no longer a disaster insofar as COVID-19 and the pandemic is concerned. We've got vaccinations, we've got immunity to an extent, and therefore we need to then move on with, with life, living with COVID-19. But should there be another disaster that comes up, God forbid, then there's no reason why we shouldn't go back to the state of disaster. And yeah, let me leave it at that.
Okay, so talk to me about whether, and I'm talking to you as a scientist here as well, and somebody who's advising government but not necessarily part of this government. Talk to me about criticism that the health department and government as a whole is trying to micromanage the nation by actually now having the National Health Act in place to put in regulations to deal with COVID-19. And I'm asking you this because there are now questions about why we still have to wear masks, why there's still this belief that we have to manage the size of people outdoors as well. So what's your response to all of that criticism?
Sure. So, as the Ministerial Advisory Committee on COVID, the advisories that we have submitted to government, those are actually currently now available, on the public, on the website, SA Coronavirus website. And, and anybody will actually see there that we have been very specific, in that we agree that it's important for now to still keep on masks on, within indoors. Because remember, masks don't just protect against COVID, but for other, respiratory diseases as well. And really, from where we're sitting, we need to shift from mandates into actually, the individuals taking, preventive responsibilities. And so where we are saying, if we're saying masks must continue indoors, if you're outdoors, you have got to take the responsibility and avoid crowded areas. And for those who still want to continue using their masks, they must continue to do that. So really, for us, there's got to be that shift, because we're now moving into mitigation and living with the, with the virus. Now, the issue around, numbers, Shahan, I'll be honest with you, in that we had actually put out, an advisory where we felt that really, especially outdoors, it really just doesn't make sense to limit numbers. But remember, as we always say, we provide, an advice, and then government, looks at every other thing else, and they come up with a final, implementation. And so we have to just leave that to government. But otherwise, in the issue as well around how the current draft regulations look like, we have already presented our concerns to the Department of Health. And at the moment, we are assisting the department to review the draft regulations such that because you are not clear whether are we talking COVID-19, are we talking, infectious diseases, are we talking, diseases that are transmitted via droplet, or, there's a need to definitely improve on the current regulations that have been sent out. And, there are a few of the members of the MEC that are assisting government to do that. But at the same time, as to whether they will take that or not, is it something that's yet to be seen.
After these very long 30 days, where we're still going to have to wear masks indoors, according to most people, do you think we can drop it altogether? Will we be at that point?
As mandates, probably yes. But like I say, we should still allow people who want to. I've seen a lot of people saying, well, I want to continue wearing my mask. Whenever I feel, I don't feel safe. So there might be, because we want to continue to monitor, is it still necessary? And also, especially during seasons, the interwave seasons, where there are very few, cases, that, we might actually be able to do away with masks. But we just feel we're not there as yet, especially because, as you know, our vaccination rates are not up to standard. So we really would like to see a lot more people getting vaccinated.
Yeah. So I just want to be clear on this. As the Ministerial Advisory Committee, are you saying that masks no longer need to be mandatory after this 30-day transition period?
No. We are saying masks are still important in indoor gatherings. Okay? And we're saying we then need to continue to monitor. Right now, we're approaching, winter, and there's an expectation that there might be another wave that's coming in. So we wouldn't want to drop masks as we speak. So we're saying even beyond the 30 days, we'll still feel, indoors, it is still important to wear masks. But into the future, we're looking at a position where they will no longer be mandatory.
Okay. How do I put this nicely? We have spoken to so many other scientists who have said that masks are not necessary, especially not just because of the vaccination rate, which I know is a major concern for you as the Ministerial Advisory Committee, as well as government. They're saying that population immunity is so high in South Africa that we no longer need those masks indoors as well. You totally disagree with that as MAC?
I'm laughing because totally disagreeing is probably not correct, because like I say, we are saying for now, for where we are sitting at this point in time, we feel it is
I'm very irritated by that. That connection. Sally and I are going to keep talking. Prof, can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you.
Oh, great. You broke up just as we're answering that very important question. So pick it up from the beginning for us, please.
Okay, maybe conveniently for me, but anyway, I was just saying, I'm saying at the moment, we really just feel it is not yet that time where we can do away with masks indoors, especially also because we know that most of our, areas are not well ventilated. And so that's why, as the MEC, we have decided to say, let's hang on to masks indoors. But obviously, there's going to be a need to review this, in the near future and see whether it is still necessary to make them mandatory.
And what about the Ministerial Advisory Committee? Are you still necessary right now?
Well, actually, the Ministerial Advisory Committee, remember, there are committees for other, conditions. For instance, there's a MEC for antimicrobial resistance. So government might see that there's a need for a MEC for, it might not be COVID-19 specifically, but it might be for any other pandemic. And so, but it's going to be important to, in the very near future, for the Department of Health to decide what do they do with us. Should we not rather than have a MEC that's going to look at a broader, pandemics rather than just COVID, and make sure that then that gets integrated into the other MECs that are there already.
Yeah, we all know that our government needs the skills and advice when it comes to these things. Last question. Sure. And this is the trouble we saw at Heathrow Airport in London, because there's so many staff who have called in sick because they tested positive for COVID-19. And this is despite a huge vaccination rate. What does that tell you going forward about how this virus actually affects the body, despite people being vaccinated, despite people actually having T cells because they've had the virus before?
Well, I guess it takes us back to the fundamental, a role of immunization, in that, whilst we hope that it can prevent infections, we have seen with COVID-19 and the current existing vaccines that they are not able to 100% prevent infections. But where we see, the most impact of vaccines is actually in admissions to hospital and severe disease. And so what it therefore means is that we are moving towards a phase of saying when one gets, COVID-19, it is like when you have flu, in that when you have flu, you might need a day or two away from work, but otherwise it is not severe. And so we see it in that light, unless we can actually get better vaccines that will reduce infections even, much more significantly than what we're seeing with the current, vaccines that are available.
Okay, thank you so much for your time and your insight. Appreciate your work. Co-Chairperson of the Ministerial Advisory Committee, Professor Koleka Mlisana.